Welcome to the Ultimate Sports Podcast Special Edition, where I recap every trade deadline deal and deals that didn't happen and whatnot. I'm just going to go around the league division by division and talk about what teams did and did not do. All right, we'll start in the American League East, where the first place Yankees, the biggest surprise of the day is that they did not go out to improve their starting rotation. I think that is an epic failure by Brian Cashman. Just a big-time failure. I don't think he's failed at something in a very long time. And to me, he gets an F for that. Especially with Houston making its upgrade in their rotation with Greinke, which we'll get to. And they didn't even upgrade their bullpen. They're really banking on Luis Severino and Dellin Betances to come back and be contributors for them. And if they're good and they are what the Yankees think they are and what the fans know they are, then, hey, it's better than pretty much anything that was traded, that's for sure, because Severino's an ace when he's right, and Dellin Betances is a top 5 MLB reliever when he's right. So just a bad day for the Yankees, even on a day where they won the ball game. The Boston Red Sox failed to acquire bullpen help, and that is solely on GM Dave Dombrowski and his unwillingness to go big to get somebody like a Shane Green or somebody like Edwin Diaz and Felipe Vasquez, somebody like that. But he's a prospect hugger too, and this time around he is. And I don't think Nathan Eovaldi in the bullpen is going to work out like it did in the playoffs last year. Just don't. Nathan Eovaldi is a nice pitcher, but he's someone that's very streaky, and he is who he is, and I'm not really sold that he's going to do what he did again last year, so that's another loser. The Tampa Bay Rays made a nice acquisition acquiring Jesus Aguilar from the Milwaukee Brewers, and they sent back Jacob Faria to Milwaukee in the deal. Aguilar's having a bad season compared to what he did last year, and I did think that last year was a bit of a fluke for them, but if he reverts into the guy he was last year, then the Rays got themselves a good player. I just think that the Rays could have done better. Maybe inquire about Daniel Vogelbach from the Mariners or somebody like that. And another trade they made that I absolutely hated, Nick Anderson and Trevor Richards from the Marlins for Jesus Sanchez and another prospect. I forget who's going back, but that was a horrible trade for Tampa. Jesus Sanchez is not worth those two players. I'm sorry. I think he would have been fine if they gave him to Seattle for Daniel Vogelbach, because they were more desperate for a bat than they were for a pitcher. So I don't get why they traded that guy for somebody that is mediocre. I'm sorry, Trevor Richards is not a very good major league pitcher. Yes, he's been on the terrible Marlins, but he's just not good. The Rays really could have done better, in my opinion. The Toronto Blue Jays sold off Daniel Hudson. They got a nice arm back. They did not trade Ken Giles. I heard that he was close to getting traded to the New York Yankees, but I think the Yankees rightfully passed on Giles because he sucks in big games, and Giles apparently has an elbow issue. So I think that really hurt Giles' trade value. But I think the Blue Jays are in good shape going forward. Bo Bichette, Vlad Jr., so they didn't really have to do anything. And then they traded Stroman, obviously, and got an underwhelming package return compared to what the Indians got back for Trevor Bauer. So that trade looks even worse for the Blue Jays than it did when they made it. The Baltimore Orioles stood pat. Michael Givens and Trey Mancini are still Orioles. I think that both those guys have a lot of value right now. Maybe they get moved in the offseason as the Orioles continue to rebuild. But the Orioles were under pressure to move anybody like they were with Machado last year. But that, to me, they at least should have tried to get something for Givens and for Mancini. AL Central, the Indians, mega winners. I talked about the package they got for Trevor Bauer earlier on my regular podcast, and they really should get themselves a pat on the back. Their offense is so much better than it was. And I think that they're banking on Corey Kluber and Carlos Carrasco to come back and be what they're capable of being, which is not inconceivable, but those guys really haven't been as good as they were 2 years ago even. So it's risky, but it's something that they had to do in trading Trevor Bauer because they couldn't afford to keep him on their team going into next year. Puig's a rental. He'll be motivated to get a new contract, so I think he'll play well for them. Franmil Reyes is a stud in terms of a power hitter, and I think he's going to be wearing a Tribe uniform for a while. So I think the Indians had themselves a very solid day. And then they get Logan Allen in that deal, who is a very good pitching prospect from the Padres. The Twins, they got Sam Dyson at the last minute from San Francisco, so he certainly helps them in their bullpen. But to me, the Twins absolutely needed a pitcher to go with Berrios on top of that rotation. That's a failure by them. And now they're in a battle to win the AL Central. I am not convinced that the Minnesota Twins are going to win the AL Central. They failed to upgrade their rotation. Yeah, their bullpen's better with Dyson there now, but they needed an ace-level pitcher to go with Jose Berrios on top of their rotation. Jake Odorizzi's a nice pitcher, having a good year, but he's a number 3 or number 4 guy. I'm sorry. So disappointing for the Twins. Chicago White Sox really didn't do anything. They kept their guys like Von Nova and Alex Colomé. So they really stood pat. Jose Abreu's still there. Yoan Moncada's going on the IL now, I'm reading. So that is something that is disappointing for the White Sox. They could have gotten stuff back for Colomé, team that was in need for a reliever. The Royals, the only really move they made was trading away Martin Maldonado. They ended up keeping guys like Billy Hamilton and Whit Merrifield around. Maybe Merrifield's moved in the offseason. There's a lot of rumors linking him to the Chicago Cubs. Solaire's name was in rumors. They kept him. Jake Deichmann went to Oakland. I think he'll help them. Homer Bailey also went to Oakland. So the Royals really didn't do a lot for me. The Tigers traded away Nicholas Castellanos at the buzzer to the Cubs. I think that is a great ad for Chicago. I'll get to them, but the trade also dealt away Shane Green. I really don't know the package yet. So Detroit had themselves a good day. Matt Boyd's still on their team. Maybe they trade him in the offseason. Who knows? But Detroit traded away 2 assets that's going to net them back some value. AL West. The Astros got Zach Greinke. He'll slide into their number 3 spot in their rotation. He's not under pressure at all. Just like Patrick Corbin in D.C. He's the number 3 starter who's going to thrive there because he's not asked to do much. If he came to the Yankees, I think that he would have been under pressure. If he came to the Phillies, I think he would have been under some pressure. Twins, I think there would have been pressure. Astros, no pressure. All the pressure's on Verlander and Cole to succeed, especially Cole with him being in that contract year. So Greinke goes to Houston, and Houston also gets Joe Biagini for their pen and Aaron Sanchez as a switch pen/rotation guy. Both of those guys have not been that good this year. Biagini's shown flashes, so is Sanchez. I think Sanchez is capable of a change of scenery benefit, so we'll see about that. So Astros had themselves a good day. The Angels didn't do anything. That's a disappointment. They should have been a seller. They should have traded off some of their relievers like Hansel Robles and maybe even Cambid Rosian. And they should have at least listened on Cole Calhoun, who could have been a free agent this offseason if he wanted to be. So that's another what if for the Angels. The A's, I think, had a good day. They went out and got Jake Deichmann, but that was the other day. Homer Bailey is a good ad. They got somebody. Who'd they get that's going to help them? Oh, Tanner Roark. Tanner Roark went into a good situation for him. He would have failed in New York. He would have failed in Philly. He would have failed perhaps in Houston, too. He needed to go to somewhere that would benefit to him in a big ballpark like Oakland. So that is a very good fit for Oakland. I think they could have added a bat offensively. I think Nicholas Castellanos would have been a great fit for Oakland as well as Trey Mancini. But they didn't do that. Their bullpen's going to be better with the Deichmann acquisition. So I think the A's did themselves well today as well. You have the Mariners, who trade away Roenis Elias to the Nationals, got a piece back in return that could potentially help them down the road with Kyle Johnston. So Mariners took advantage of their closer's trade value there. And the Texas Rangers held on to Mike Minor and Lance Lynn. And I think they did that because they know they're moving into a new ballpark next year and they're under contract for next year. So I think the Rangers are a team that wants to be good next year. So they decided to keep those guys. Although they did trade away Chris Martin to Atlanta for Colby Allard. And I praised that trade for the Rangers before on the podcast. National League East. The Braves really made themselves a nice bullpen. They acquired Shane Green from Detroit, who will be their closer. Mark Melancon of the Giants, who could benefit from a change of scenery after being a bust acquisition for the Giants as a free agent signing. So we'll see if a change of scenery benefits them. And then Chris Martin, who I thought they overpaid for by giving up Colby Allard. So good trio in the back of their bullpen now. I think they should have went out and gotten another starter too. That, I think, won't bode well for Alex Antopoulos when it's all said and done, when he goes out to try to beat the Dodgers. So I don't think that's a good look on the Braves that they didn't go out and get a starter to go with Dallas Keuchel, Mike Soroka, and Kevin Gossman in that rotation. Washington improved their bullpen tremendously. They got Ronis Elias, Hunter Strickland, and Daniel Hudson to add to that bullpen. So that suddenly becomes a better bullpen. We'll see if they all work out. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. Maybe some of them do, some of them don't. But I have to give credit to Mike Rizzo for improving his team's biggest weakness. So maybe they'll go on a nice run here to solidify themselves a playoff spot. The Phillies really didn't do much. I was disappointed in their effort to go out and try to get some relief help. I know they picked up Drew Smyly on the waiver wire. He's looked excellent in his 2 starts. I got to give Philadelphia props for that. And their bullpen, to me, just won't get it done. I don't trust that bullpen at all. They should have went out and got somebody. Ken Giles, I don't think, would have been the answer there. Maybe somebody like Mark Melancon, who could have benefited from a change of trainer. Sam Dyson would have been great there. San Francisco ended up keeping Will Smith, but he would have been fine there. But I'm disappointed that the Phillies didn't go out and improve their bullpen. That's a failure on that front office. Mets did not trade Zach Wheeler. Looks like they'll give them a qualifying offer and get the extra first-round pick if they choose to let him walk, unless they re-sign him. They did not trade Syndergaard after many people expected them to trade Noah Syndergaard. They trade Jason Vargas away for a Double-A catcher from Philly. I forgot about that acquisition for Philadelphia, by the way. I think Jason Vargas will be okay for them, but I'm not convinced that he's the answer to their back end of their rotation problems, although he's had a pretty solid year. I just think there's going to be some pressure pitching in Philadelphia, although it's in a lesser bit of a role. Back to the Mets, the Marcus Stroman ad, that was clearly a push move to try to be good next year so they can have a potential top 3 of Jacob deGrom, Noah Syndergaard, and Marcus Stroman. That's easily the best trio in the National League East right now, although Max Scherzer, Patrick Corbin, and Steven Strasburg's a nice one too. But I'm not a huge Patrick Corbin fan, and I've stated that on my podcast, and I'm going to continue to state it. He's overpaid, and I just think that in a playoff series, I really don't trust him in a Game 3 to match up with Heijin Ryu, who has been brilliant in the playoffs for the Dodgers in the past. And Corbin has had playoff experience, but did not go well whatsoever. So give me the Mets top 3 over the Nationals top 3. Unpopular opinion, but that's my take. But I think that the Mets should have been sellers. They should have traded Wheeler. They should have traded Syndergaard. And quite frankly, they should have traded Jacob deGrom last summer when his value was at his peak highest. And they could have gotten a boatload of prospects in return. And even better than what Arizona got back for Zach Greinke, which I'll get to shortly. Miami, I think, quietly did a nice job. They traded away a young starter, Zach Gallen, who really was promising for them, to Arizona for Jazz Chisholm, who was Arizona's top prospect. Now, the Marlins found themselves the shortstop of the future. So that is absolutely a great trade for Miami, in my opinion. So, to the NL Central, the Cubs at the buzzer get Nicholas Castellanos. He improves their offense for sure. But to me, the Cubs really missed out on getting some bullpen help. Although they did get David Phelps from the Blue Jays, who I think can help. But I really think they should have gone after those giant guys like Sam Dyson, Mark Melancon, those types of guys. And maybe some of those Diamondback relievers that I think could have been had for the right price. So we'll see how Phelps works out. I just think that Pedro Strop's been really bad this year, and he's on the IL. Craig Kimbrell, I think, will certainly help them for sure. But I just think that the Cubs really should have focused more on upgrading their bullpen, although the Castellanos acquisition is very nice. And he can be a little versatile for them. He can play left, he can play right, he can play the infield positions, corner infield, but he'll be more of a right fielder for them. And then they would have Jason Hayward in center field, and in left field maybe Chris Bryant. And then they can have David Bodie or Robo Garcia or Bryant or one of those guys at third, and have Kyle Schwarber in left field. But as we know, Kyle Schwarber is a huge defensive liability. So a nice acquisition for the Cubs. Cardinals, disappointing for them. They didn't go out and get relief help. I thought that Sergio Romo was a possibility for them. They didn't do that. I thought that they were a dark horse candidate to get one of those starters, like a Mike Leake type. We'll get to Mike Leake in a second. So, Cardinals, disappointing day for them. Brewers got Jacob Faria for Jesus Aguilar. I think the Rays will probably get the better end of the deal. But Faria's solid. I think he'll help them in the swing role for Milwaukee. He could start. He could come out of the bullpen for them. So, an interesting day for Milwaukee. Oh, and then they made a horrible trade with the Giants, acquiring Drew Pomeranz, and they sent back a highly touted prospect, Mauricio Dubon. And I think that's a horrible trade for the Brewers. I get it that they have Keston Hiura manning second base for now and for the future. But I really think that it's a very big disappointment. I just think that the Brewers could have done better by getting somebody better than Drew Pomeranz. Robert Murray of The Athletic reported that the Brewers and the Giants agreement on significant deal as Mauricio Dubon went to the Giants. A lot of people were screaming, "Oh my God, Bumgarner," but it ended up being a horrible starter in Drew Pomeranz. So that was just horrible. And Ray Black goes to Milwaukee too. He could be a swing guy for him too. That's a very bad deal for Milwaukee. And good job on San Francisco acquiring Dubon in that deal. That was a massive overpay by the Bruins. The Cincinnati Reds acquired Trevor Bauer last night. We talked about that. And then they sent away Scooter Gennett to San Francisco. So now they really don't have a second baseman. Unless they put Jose Peraza there and then have Jose Iglesias and Eugenio Suarez on your left side of the infield. Then you have Votto. Catcher is a bit of a platoon. Tucker Barnhart and Ryan LaVarnway right now. And then their outfield right now is Jesse Winker. And they already traded Puig. I can't think. Derek Dietrich and Scott Schebler. And I think Schebler's on the injured list right now, if I'm not mistaken. So, I was not that impressed with the Reds. I wouldn't have given up Taylor Trammell for Trevor Bauer. Maybe they flip Bauer again in the offseason, because I'm not convinced that the Reds are going to be some contender next year. They have to make other moves for them to be seriously considered in that division next year. So a player to be named later, or cash is going back to the Reds for Scooter Gennett. Pittsburgh traded Jordan Lyles yesterday or the day before to the Brewers. And today they traded away Corey Dickerson, the Philly. I think Dickerson will be fine in Philly. He'll hit a lot of home runs there in that ballpark. But now Pittsburgh makes themselves worse a little bit. And To me, they're an interesting offseason team. Do they trade away Marte and Bell in the offseason? That's going to be interesting. I'm going to do a podcast actually maybe tomorrow or something, and for fun predict a little bit of the offseason and names I think could be on the move in terms of non-free agents. And Pittsburgh, I think, will be involved in those conversations. The NL West, Dodgers, they did not improve the back end of their bullpen like I thought they would. Very disappointed in them. They acquired Jed Jerko from the Cardinals for infield depth. That's really it. So the Dodgers, to me, really didn't do what they were supposed to do. Or else they're going to lose to Houston in the World Series, perhaps. Then the Diamondbacks, I think, had an excellent day. I think they had the best day out of the NL West teams. They trade away Zach Greinke and his contract. They get back Seth Beer, J.B. Buskauskas, and Corbin Martin. That is a massive overpay for somebody that's going to be the number 3 starter in the Astros rotation. So that really, really was a big pay for that, and I think the Diamondbacks are going to benefit well. I questioned the Jazz Chisholm trade at first, but getting those other 3 prospects really, I think, offset the loss of Jazz Chisholm. Zach Gallen, I think, will help the Diamondbacks long term. He showed some promise with the Marlins. I was just surprised they let go of Chisholm for a guy that really hasn't had much big league experience. So, interested to see how that works out for them. And then they acquired Mike Leake from the Mariners. I believe player to be named later, going back to Seattle. So, Leake essentially replaces Greinke in that rotation. He'll be like a number 3, number 4 on a good team. But on the Diamondbacks right now, he's their number 2. And then they keep Robbie Ray. And Archie Bradley's still a Diamondback too. Maybe those guys are dealt in the winter. The Padres got Taylor Trammell in that big trade from last night. Trammell's somebody that everybody loves and thinks is going to be a star. He's having a down year in the minors, but he's somebody that's an athlete and is a good defensive player. And maybe he rebounds offensively a little bit, and the trade can help him from a change of scenery standpoint. So, going to be interesting for the Padres as they go into the offseason. And then they gave up a lot to get Trammell. Obviously, Logan Allen and Framil Reyes among the people that they had given up. And then you have the San Francisco Giants, who decided to keep Madison Bumgarner and Will Smith, but trade away Sam Dyson and Mark Melancon. Oh, and they keep Tony Watson, too. I think the Giants should have sold everyone. I think this run's a fluke, and they're not as good as teams like the Cardinals, the Nationals, even the Phillies, too. So, going to be interesting to see what happens with the Giants long term. Do they end up re-signing Bumgarner? That wouldn't be the worst thing in the world, but well, you never know. Maybe somebody will overpay for Bumgarner in the offseason in free agency. But I think this hurts him going into free agency that he wasn't traded, because now he has a qualifying offer stuck to him, and teams are going to be reluctant to sign him. He could be the Dallas Keuchel of next year, so that's not good at all. So that's that. And then they trade away the relievers, Andrew Pomeranz, and then they get Dubon back, which I think will be a great ad for them long term. So they get a good prospect for Drew Pomeranz. That's the second time that I could recall that Drew Pomeranz was traded for a good prospect. Although Espinoza did not work out, in fairness to the Red Sox, and not really fair to the Padres. But this is the second time that that's happened where they get something good in return for Drew Pomeranz, meaning that's NL West team. This time it's the Giants. And last but not least, the Colorado Rockies stood pat. I kind of don't blame them for it, because they do have some talent on that team, and I think that's a team that's capable of turning it around next year, and they really don't have any free agents on that team either. And that's just a team that I think was wrapped in a little bit of bad luck, and Kyle Freeland stunk this year. Herman Marquez, I saw a proposed trade for him on MLB Network by Mark DeRosa, and I thought it was horrible from the Astros' point of view, because to me, Herman Marquez is a number 3 starter. Zach Greinke is an ace caliber pitcher. in my opinion. So he'll help them. And meanwhile, for the Rockies, it's not the worst thing in the world that they stood pat. But I'm not going to kill them for it either. All right, I'm going to have guests on tomorrow. I'm probably going to have on my buddy Jeff Burns, who's a Yankees fan, to get his take on all this. Maybe I'll get Doug Saravo on, another buddy of mine who's a Rays fan, see what he thinks of the acquisition of Jesus Aguilar and how the Rays go forward. And maybe I'll have one more surprise baseball guest on. Stay tuned. Hope you guys have a great day, everybody.